Just ensuring that your brand and your brand story is truly connected to your product and not just the category. If you can replace someone's brand name and everything still makes sense, you haven't differentiated yourself enough.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss, the CEO of Marketing Architects, and Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hey, Elena and Ange.
Hey, guys. We're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. Today, we're talking about the value of brand. Why does brand matter? How do you build it? How do you measure it? If you know anybody who's skeptical of the fluffiness of brand, or maybe if you yourself are a little skeptical, this is the episode for you. So I'll kick us off, as I always do, with some research. I want to start with a great article from Nikhil Banga and Greg Bureau from Kantar titled Brand Valuation, From Marketing Metric to Boardroom Essential. In the article, they describe how brand building is often underestimated and seen as an extra cost, but it's actually a major asset. Kantar's Brand Z data shows brands make up about 30% of business value, and sometimes even more than 50%. And if you're wondering what Brand Z is, it's a brand equity and valuation tool. So it uses quantitative customer data to measure the isolated impact of brand. And brand matters a lot. Strong brands outperform the stock market, and they're resilient even during tough economic times. They justify higher prices and higher loyalty. Brand valuation aids in licensing and sponsorship strategies. And if you can align senior management KPIs with brand building, you help marketing's contributions be recognized. Essentially, Kantar believes brand isn't just a marketing metric, it's a boardroom essential, and it's crucial for decision-making and business growth, which I think we'd agree with. I also wanted to share a few fun highlights from Brand Finance's Global 500 report from earlier this year. So every year they look at the 5,000 biggest brands and then they rank them across all sectors and countries according to their value and strength. So Rob, you'll be happy to know that Apple made a comeback this year, growing its brand at 74% and adding $219 billion in brand value. NVIDIA's brand surged by 163%, making it the world's fastest growing brand. And I can only imagine how much that's grown since this even came out in January. And Tesla fell out of the top 10, dropping to 18th place, but Tesla's brand value is still significant, ranked at $58 billion.
One thing that stood out to me in that report, Elena, was that the USA accounts for over 200 brands and half of the total value of the ranking. I wondered what marketing's role in that would be. We've talked about how the USA has been a bit behind in terms of some of our counterparts on the other side of the world. So I thought that was interesting. It led me into how is this calculated? So I dug into that a little bit more, and it looks like Brand Finance uses two metrics, and one of them has three submetrics. They compile a brand strength index, which is a component of brand investment, how much money and effort the company puts into promoting and improving the brand. They look at brand equity, how people feel about the brand and their perceptions. That's where the consumer research comes in. And then they look at brand performance, how well the brand does in terms of sales and in market share and some other business metrics as well. Then they look at what they call royalty relief. So they've got a royalty rate. So this would be like the rent a company would pay to use its own brand if it didn't own it. They look at similar deals in the real world where companies pay to use brands. And then the score from the brand strength index helped decide what percentage of sales that royalty rate is appropriate for the brand. And then they calculate that brand value. They estimate how much money the brand will make in the future based on past performance and market conditions. They apply that royalty rate. So they multiply the expected future sales by the royalty rate to see how much the brand is worth in terms of royalties. And then discounting to present value, which is really about figuring out how much future money it's worth today. So considering things like inflation and risk, and that gives them that score. So it's a little complicated, but I just thought that's interesting because there's so much that goes into it. It's not just how we think of brand, of course, related to television. And our view on brand has evolved since we started in business in radio years ago. We definitely place a lot more value into brand now in terms of an ability to drive a lot of of broad business impacts, some of which we'll talk about today. But when you start to think about how that brand strength score shows up, it starts to make a little more sense. And the US does hold the top in terms of companies: Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon's. And those four, I think the next closest was like 3 times less in terms of that brand valuation. So we have a leg up a bit in the US.
It seems like, I was going to say, maybe wonder if Apple's kind of carrying the team a little bit.
I don't get it. This math is goofy to me. And I love Apple. I love brand, first of all. So this is not a knock on adding brand value and the importance of brand, but this math just smells funny to me. You look at Apple. Apple is the biggest brand on the planet. When was the last time someone said, I sure hate my iPhone? They're adored, right? Apple is like the Taylor Swift of brands, and Taylor Swift is like the Apple of musicians. So there's nobody on this planet that doesn't have a relationship, or at least aware of Apple. How do you grow that brand 74% in 1 year unless they found a new audience on Venus? Like, it does. I don't understand how they came up with that number. It just feels like funny math to me. If you told me it grew 75% in the last 5 years or 10 years, but in a year, that doesn't make sense. NVIDIA, sure, I get it. No one even knows how to spell NVIDIA, let alone understand who NVIDIA was a year ago. And now they're the darling because they show up in the headlines. But I think that's even just in the business world. You know, I don't think your average person on the street would go, oh, NVIDIA, I love me some NVIDIA. I don't get the math.
That's a really good point. So I'm looking back at this study. I'm like, did I get this wrong? No, they say it grew 74%. This is why they say they've grown their brand through strategic diversification and premiumization, moving away from heavy reliance on iPhone sales towards ventures into wearables and services such as Apple TV. But then they've been doing that for a while.
They've been doing that for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder how much of it has to do with just their stock this year as compared to last year.
Or how much they maybe wanted to make a headline out of their research.
Okay. Easy.
I mean, imagine if you told Taylor Swift, hey, Taylor Swift, grow your brand next year by 75%. Like, it doesn't even make sense.
Start dating Travis Kelce. She technically did
right,
that.
That's actually true. She did do that this year.
She definitely grew his brand, yeah. I don't know what he did.
I don't know, Rob. Yes. That might not be the best example.
That's probably a bad analogy.
Yeah. Well, Rob, that's a great point. But Ange, if you're saying that the formula is made out of things like market share, I'm assuming stock price would, so maybe that's why they took such a big jump.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty comprehensive view and very, very gray box in terms of how the calculation comes together. So
yet it's 74%, not 75%, not 72%. It's 74%.
Yeah. I still think it's interesting to at least try to quantify. If you think about it, it's impossible to actually get down to a precise number as far as what a brand is worth, because a brand exists in like the minds of your customers. So they're doing their best, Rob.
And I think that's the challenge that marketers deal with in trying to prove brand, is just that sort of intangibility of, why does it matter? Because I don't want someone shopping when they come into market. Why do I need to defend that? I don't even know how to defend it other than just being obvious. So it's a good shot. And specificity matters. That's why they do 74%, so 75%.
Rob, our branding expert, I couldn't resist asking for a Rob history lesson for this one, because I'm personally very curious about where brand even came from. So can you tell us a little bit about its history?
Only after Taylor cues that music.
It's time for Rob's history lesson 3.
It's ancient Egypt around 2000 BC, the good old days. Here, branding starts quite literally with a hot iron. Craftsmen and farmers brand livestock to signify ownership in ensuring that Betsy the cow doesn't end up in a neighbor's herd. This practice spreads far and wide, marking the dawn of branding as a means of identification and quality assurance. Now let's jump to the Middle Ages in Europe. With bustling marketplaces and guilds, merchants begin to use unique marks on their goods. These early trademarks signify craftsmanship and origin, offering buyers a way to distinguish between a fine swordsman's blade and a cheap knockoff. This era sets the stage for brands as symbols of trust and reputation. Fast forward. It's the 19th century, the age of industrialization. Mass production is in full swing, and products like Coca-Cola and Campbell's Soup hit the shelves. Brands transform into promises of consistent quality and experiences. Suddenly, it's not just about the product, it's about the story and the values it represents. Enter the 20th century, the golden age of advertising. Radio, television, and print media become battlegrounds for brands vying for consumer attention. Iconic campaigns and jingles, think "Just Do It" or "I'm Loving It," embed themselves into our collective consciousness. Branding evolves into a strategic art form, shaping consumer desires and lifestyles. Today in the digital age, branding is more dynamic than ever. It's no longer confined to logos and slogans. It's about creating immersive experiences and branding communities. Brands engage with consumers through social media, influencer partnerships, and interactive content. The rise of personal branding adds another layer, where individuals cultivate their own distinct identities online. I like to call them self-ebrities. And there you have it. From ancient hot irons to modern day hashtags, branding has always been about making a mark, telling a story, and connecting with people. So next time you see a logo, remember it's not just a symbol, it's a saga, centuries in the making.
That's great, Rob. I love your new word you came up with?
Self-ebrity. My wife and I coined that term.
I love that. Did you actually come up with that, or is that
I actually did come up with that, yes. I don't know if I asked ChatGPT if it'd give me credit, but I did come up with that.
Yeah. And now ChatGPT knows it, so it's about to no longer be yours. But all right. Thank you, Rob. I think a good place to go next, now that we've covered some research on brand, the history of brand, I want to talk about why it matters. Ange just mentioned that you would think naturally a brand matters. We really have to defend the value of brand, but we do. Luckily, though, there's real data behind it. So if you're a marketer and you're looking to invest more in brand or prove its value, we're going to cover some evidence today that supports why brand matters. It does things like it improves your pricing power, loyalty, your market share. It reduces your marketing costs. It increases your trust and perceived quality. It creates emotional connections, and it improves financial performance. Honestly, brand does so much that it's impossible to cover all of it in just one episode. So Rob, Ange, and I all came prepared to defend just one of these brand effects each. So Ange, would you like to kick us off?
I will kick us off. And my favorite, most significant impact of a strong brand is pricing power. So I'm going to take that one. And I will use the example of the iPhone versus something I have absolutely never heard of, the OnePlus 7T Pro. Have you guys even heard of this phone?
No.
So it's sold today for $499. I looked up this morning. Offers more storage, more RAM, bigger screen at 40% less cost. Yet, of course, the iPhone dominates in sales. And this pricing power, it's not just anecdotal, although we all have examples like that in our heads of like, why am I paying for this? Like I could have the cheap version, the non-branded version, and there are certain categories. One for me would be things like Tylenol and ibuprofen. It's hard for me to choose the brand for some reason, like versus the non-branded option. But this has been studied. So Kantar studied this, showed that consumers who are brand driven pay on average 11% more for brands, which that actually, I felt that was sort of low. But then when a brand is perceived as meaningfully different, this premium can go up to 38%. And even price-driven consumers are willing to pay 14% more for a brand they see as unique. And I think that brands that fail to justify their price through differentiation and having that brand often resort to discounting. So it's a spiral. You end up in a death spiral of weakened margins, reduced brand strength versus looking at it from a perspective of sustainable growth will come from really balancing volume and price and ensuring that the brand remains differentiated and meaningful in the eyes of the consumers.
I knew you were going to pick pricing power, but yeah, that's a great one.
I'm predictable.
So I'm going to ask you smart people a question. What channel has the lowest CPM?
Which channel?
TV by marketing architects.
Yes, exactly.
The answer is word of mouth. Right. So that has the lowest cost per thousand. When you think about branding, what branding can do, it can drive down your marketing cost. And even on channels that you are paying a CPM for, it actually drives down your cost per thousand. How? Because when you have a great campaign and great branding running, more people are viewing it. than they are if they were running the same ad at the same CPM at the same time. So ultimately, you're driving down your cost per thousand. How's that for a non-math guy? And then there's also the benefit of cross-channel integration as it relates to driving down your cost, where all the different ships rise your boat, so 1 + 1 = 3. So mine is driving down your marketing cost through great branding.
I love that one because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I got to invest in brand. It's going to cost me more. It's like, well, no, actually in the long run, the goal is to bring that down.
Rob, did you say all your different ships rise your boat?
Boy, did I screw that up. That's actually backwards. It rises all boats, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Great brand rises all boats. Well, thank you. Boy, I'm really good at butchering metaphors.
I am going to go ahead and cover perceived quality, mostly because I found a piece of research that I really wanted to share. And this research, it really highlights just how much having a strong brand can change what consumers assume about the quality of your product. This is a paper from the British Food Journal. It's by Tihomir Vranashevich and Ron Kostanchets. It's called The Effect of Brand on the Perceived Quality of Food Products. The study supports the idea that brands serve as a key indicator of quality for our customers. When deciding what to buy, people often prioritize brand recognition and reputation over the actual physical attributes of the product. This means that a well-known brand logo can instantly signal quality and trust to potential buyers. These researchers also found that strong brands significantly impact consumer choice and loyalty. They found that branded products consistently outsold non-branded ones. So we're more likely to choose a product if it's from a brand we recognize and trust, even if the physical product characteristics are similar. But here's a super interesting finding. We don't just evaluate products based on appearance, packaging, or price. Instead, we use the brand as a primary filter to assess quality. So once a product passes our brand filter, then all these other attributes come into play. So in conclusion, your strong brand will help customers also see your product as high quality. And I loved that, especially that part about how like the first layer of your brain is, do I recognize the brand? Before we even look at like the color, the quality. If you have a strong brand, you just have such a leg up.
Well, that's that system 1 versus system 2 thinking, right? Like we can't possibly process at a deep level every single decision we need to be making throughout the day. So it's just, do I know it? Do I not?
I think that's such a great point, Angela, that as you think about brands that do extensions, they sort of help you make decisions for you by going, okay, well, that's a Dyson hair dryer. It must be good because the Dyson vacuum is good. So I'm not even going to look at other hair dryers because I already know I trust the Dyson brand. So it just made my life easier.
I know you love your Dyson hair dryer, Rob.
You know it. I mean, I use it every day. I can use a flashlight to blow dry my hair. So, but my wife does love Dyson.
Yeah, I think as a marketer, it at first feels a little bit unfair. Like I could have the best product, the best service, but someone could still pick a different brand. But then you kind of have to get over it and figure out how do you build your brand, because you're not really going to change the minds of customers. So today we've covered some reasons why brand matters. I want to talk about how to actually build it. So Rob, could you share some creative best practices for building your brand?
This is a smart audience, and I know many folks already have a lot of great answers that come to mind when it comes to best practices. Obviously, clarifying your why is important, understanding your audience's needs so you can be sure that you're building a brand that connects with them, the development of memorable assets, and ultimately architecting a compelling narrative. These are all important things and are really table stakes for building a brand. But I think the most important thing is just ensuring that your brand and your brand story is truly connected to your product and not just the category. Because if you can replace someone's brand name with your brand name and everything still makes sense, you haven't differentiated yourself enough. So are you selling your product or are you selling the category is a question your team should be asking itself all the time. Because at the end of the day, if you're not differentiating yourself through your story, then you're not really branding. And what's the point of your marketing?
And Rob, that's an important part of our TV commercials, right? We always take some time to make sure if somebody saw this ad, are they going to remember what brand it was for?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big role of the strategy team at Marketing Architects, is to make sure they're uncovering those key insights about the product that are truly differentiating, even before the creative team has passed the brief.
What about channel? And we know that some channels are a little bit better at building a brand than others.
I'm sure anyone that knows our podcast is going to expect that I get on my TV soapbox here. And there is a ton of data on how effective TV is at building brands. There was a study done by Group M that found ads placed on TV as compared to social, digital channels, online shopping ads, outdoor, and public transport ranked number one for conveying a positive impression of the brand. In fact, TV ads, back to the point you made, Rob, received equal weightage alongside the recommendation of friends. So they both ranked 39%, which of course carries a lot of weight for our buying decisions just in terms of our own social network and how we use the people in our lives as recommenders of great products and services. And so I don't think I need to go on and on about how powerful TV is, but I will share something that matters that TV uses really well. And this can be used in other channels as well. And then there are some channels that it's really hard to use really well, and that's audio. So audio has immense power in memorability. This has been studied extensively by Ipsos and Nielsen and Harvard and Kantar. And really the auditory cortex, which is where you process sound, is closely linked to the hippocampus, which is a key area for memory formation. And so this connection really helps explain why audio can be particularly effective in creating those lasting memories that you need. And it's harder to maximize brand value without obviously strong levels of memorability and just that mental availability. Kantar found that slogans, when either sung or included as jingles, can be a highly effective way of not only getting your brand noticed, but instilling it into people's memories. So when ads include slogans that include the brand name and are used repeatedly and are also sung, they see a 17-point increase in overall branding scores. We also know that there's great power in music in advertising. When ads include music with a jingle or a slogan, the brand impact is higher, even with a 25-point increase from the average. And these ads with a 25-point increase in branding also have a 19-point increase in impact, a 10-point increase in involvement, and a 6-point increase in understanding. I think while there's a lot of ways to build a brand, it's data like this that's important when thinking through channel selection and how effective the investment might be in the long run.
Now, those were some statistics that made sense, unlike our opening.
And I love that you mentioned the jingle. We talked about that in our distinctive assets episode. And from the research we did for that episode and distinctive assets in general, we made one for MA. So hopefully that's creeping into everybody's brains and helping them remember us more. But yeah, creating a jingle is pretty fun. We have done a podcast episode before on measuring brand because it's a very complicated subject. So we have an episode dedicated to that, but I felt like we should still touch on it in this episode because a lot of marketers believe in the power of brand, but actually proving it and then quantifying it is where it gets tricky. And could you share some of the best ways that we've found to measure brand?
This can indeed be challenging, but I don't think that's a reason to not try. Considering the brand value numbers that we started off with today in terms of the billions and the growth with Apple, there's obviously immense potential in business valuation tied to brand. And on that note, you can absolutely use the methodology to track relatively how you stack against your competitors working through a brand finance or Kantar's Brand Z valuation reports. But I feel the challenge with those, it's hard to get the CFO on board. It's a little conceptual versus being able to really concretely say that a strong brand drives 20% more customer loyalty, something like that. So how can we go about quantifying that, pricing power or negotiation power with suppliers and distributors and retailers? I personally love, and I know our team does as well, a good old-fashioned A/B incrementality test. I mean, who doesn't love that? I still feel that it's one of the most accurate forms of measurement out there today, and it's been around forever. So I'm going to simplify this for the sake of our podcast. This is a highly simplified version. Don't come after me on LinkedIn about this, please, but hang with me. So if we were to take a brand and look for 9 total DMAs that have comparable performance in whatever we're going to test. So let's take pricing power. And for 6 months, take 3 of those markets and hold out your marketing. These tests have cost. They have hard cost to them. They have lost opportunity cost in terms of potential sales lost in the markets that are held out, but they have huge opportunity gain in the long run with the applied learning. So for 6 months in 3 markets, any marketing that contributes to brand building is turned off. You can still sell product in those markets, but like anything that drives awareness or trust or preference, consideration should all be eliminated. The next 3 markets have what you would consider kind of normal levels of marketing, whatever you were doing maybe prior. And then the last 3 markets are a spend up test for anything that contributes to the brand. And you'd want a meaningful jump in terms of the investment going into those markets. And then you run at those levels for 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, run a pricing elasticity test to see where the meaningful fall off in sales occurs. Is it a 5% increase, a 10, 20 more? And taking those learnings then and nationalizing them are where really big gains in revenue can be made. That's more CFO language than the ranking reports and things like that.
Alrighty. To wrap us up today, I thought we could play a little game. So I told Andrew and Rob not to look too closely at that brand finance data, which I know Rob doesn't like, but we're going to play the game anyways. I have a list of some brands that are in the same category as each other. I'm going to tell you the 2 brands, and then you have to guess which one has a higher brand value according to this philosophy. So however you feel about it, this is how we're ranking them. This should be going from easier to harder, but I've been wrong about how easy these games are before. So, all right. First, which one's more valuable, Amazon or eBay?
Amazon.
Burger King or McDonald's?
McDonald's.
All right. Microsoft or Intel?
Microsoft.
Yep.
Agreed.
Microsoft.
Yep.
Adidas or Nike?
Nike.
Yep. You are correct. Coke or Pepsi?
I'm going with Coca-Cola.
Me too.
Correct. All right. 100% so far. Ford or Toyota?
Ford.
Ford.
You're wrong. It's Toyota.
Oh, wow.
Next, Verizon or AT&T?
I'm definitely going to go with AT&T on that one.
Oh, gosh, that's a good one. I'm going to fight you, and I'm going to say Verizon.
It's AT&T.
Good one, Rob.
It's a close one. That's a close one.
All right. Gucci or Louis Vuitton?
I'm going to go Louis Vuitton.
Me too.
Yep. Louis Vuitton. And last one, Visa or MasterCard?
Ooh, that one's easy, actually. Visa.
I agree. Visa.
Yep.
Yep.
So that's great. I think you were nearly 100%. Just Ford or Toyota, I had a feeling that one was going to...
Yeah.
I also would have guessed Ford.
Through me.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Ayana Klaphocky for producing the show and Taylor De Los Reyes for editing. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find the show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you'd like to hear more from us, subscribe to our weekly email newsletter. It's built for marketers seeking research-first analysis of the latest trends. You can go to marketingarchitects.com/newsletter to subscribe. Now go forth and build great marketing.
Remember, it's not just a symbol, it's a Sega. It's a saga. Centuries in the making. Let me say that again.
I was like, what's a Sega?
Marketing Architects.